Hey guys, one of the Mediocre Commentators here, and I figured this would be the great chance to talk about the Thor movies. And as a comic book lover and a movie lover, I've been super excited for all the Marvel movies that have been coming out this year and all Phase 4 and the ones that are coming down the road. But besides Spider-Man No Way Home, I think the one that I'm most excited for is the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder. And after Thor Ragnarok, I feel like everyone has been wanting another Thor movie from Taika Waititi, especially since Natalie Portman as Jane Foster is returning, and Marvel somehow got the man himself, Christian Bale, Batman, the Psycho, to play one of the most brutal villains of Marvel Comics, Gore the God Butcher. The trailers make it seem to be a fun comedy-filled Thor adventure, with old characters returning, and it'd be kind of like a fun sequel. And that kind of worried me because I love Thor Ragnarok, but there are times when it blends the comedy and it kind of takes over the drama of the movie, which I would much rather have drama than comedy, which is kind of what the first two Thor films are. And Ragnarok kind of flips it on its head, which I like, but it's not perfect for me.
The damage is not too bad. As long as the foundations are still strong, we can rebuild this place. It will become a haven for all peoples and aliens of the universe.
Oh, no, no, you cannot joke about that.
When the first reactions came in, it seemed like the movie was going to be darker and more emotional than Ragnarok. Well, that's what the early critics are saying, which, if that's true, I think I'm going to love this movie because, again, the only problem I had of Ragnarok was it was too jokey and relied too much on comedy on some points. With Love and Thunder seeming to be one of the best Marvel movies yet, according to early reactions, hopefully it'll be something that everyone's going to love. Taika Waititi single-handedly revitalized the Thor character and the Thor franchise in the MCU. Thor Before Ragnarok was very serious and talked more like a Shakespearean god. When Taika took over, Thor took more of a mortal man approach and had a godlike background and godlike powers, but acted more like a normal man, which allows the audience to relate more to Thor, which works in a way. He also ditched the human characters and focused more on crazy aliens and gods more than putting Thor on Earth with Jane Foster and her friends. Chris Hemsworth's Thor also probably has gone through the most character development and changes in pain and agony than in the entire series. And I think it would be really interesting to take a look at the Thor trilogy as it stands right now and how this character has been affected through the Avengers movies and all the movies he's appeared in, and where the character stands and how he's moved, if the movies are an accurate representation of his character, which they really are not, but at least it'll make for an interesting character on a silver screen. Hopefully, at least that's what they've been. Since the last time I've watched all the Thor movies, I did like them all, but I know people don't like Thor the Dark World, but we'll see where I stand on that. Now that Jane is back in the full circle with Thor Love and Thunder, it seems to be a mix of the first two Thor films and Thor Ragnarok, with the drama and the comedy blending together greatly. Which most people say that's what Ragnarok was, but to me it doesn't blend that drama good enough for me. People seem to associate those first two Thor films as mediocre and bland action adventure comic book blockbuster films, which they were received well. I know they were in the high 60s and mid 70s, those first two films. Most MCU fans would say they were a product of the time, and they don't have enough good to offer, and that the bad outweighs the good. Again, I haven't seen the first Thor film in a couple years, and I've not seen Thor the Dark World since it came out in 2014 or whenever that film came out. So let's see how well these films rank up against Thor Ragnarok, and maybe the older films actually have good emotional moments that merit the good that their ratings were when they originally came out, and maybe they even top Thor Ragnarok, and maybe Thor Ragnarok isn't as good as people say. Let's delve back into the Thor films. First, let's take a look at 2011's Thor.
This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
Thor was one of the very first MCU movies, coming after only Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, so the expectations were, as you can tell, both very high but also low for this film. High because this film, if it sucks, it might ruin the Marvel Cinematic Universe because it was one of the first three films to come out. And low because it's Thor. And these movies weren't perceived well, like those Gods of Egypt movies. They weren't received very well, and it wouldn't be a big surprise if this movie failed and didn't make a lot of money and wasn't critically received well. The film was directed by Kenneth Branagh, who hadn't had much of a big budget action movie directing gig in the past. Like, I know he directed the 4-hour Hamlet film, and stuff like that, like big dramas. He didn't have a Marvel action-packed type of background. He really did try to make this film his own, though, by putting in his own twist on things and how it's shot and everything. And also, having Chris Hemsworth play this character really made this Thor movie what it is today. He really did define himself as the Thor character. And while the characters look, I'm not 100% with the look of this character, because it just, those eyebrows are, oh, those things are of the devil himself. His performance in all these films is really fantastic. And that also goes for Tom Hiddleston's Loki and the great, great Anthony Hopkins as Odin. I would also say this film did work for me on a lot of levels. But there are some things that were great in 2011 that seem kind of dated now. And some of the decisions made in this movie I don't totally agree with. Like what they do with Thor and Odin. Some of the choices they make I don't feel are totally in character. They don't totally ruin the movie experience and don't ruin it much at all for me. But still, it did bring the movie down a little bit for me. The movie follows Thor as he is casted out by Odin for cruel and violent actions against the Bifrost frost giants in another realm. And Thor learns to become worthy of his weapon Mjolnir as he connects with some people on Earth and learns to be more humble and defend the people he loves than to fight the people he hates. And he develops a romance with Natalie Portman's Jane Foster, while Loki, Thor's brother, plans to take over the throne and kill Thor once and for all. Well, that plot sounds very cookie cutter, with Thor going to Earth and being all weird and not knowing, like, having social cues and stuff. It sounds very cookie cutter and very 2002. But the way story is told and the jokes and how we see the movie through the character's eyes and the heartfelt and powerful emotion Brana shows in this film, it really lifts it above the basic plot and makes it a decent Marvel movie, in my opinion. It's really impressive how Marvel was able to create the world of Asgard without having to supply all the lore and detail behind it. They do supply the lore and detail, but they don't supply it like overly like those Gods of Egypt movies or the Prince of Shit, whatever it's called. It's horrible. Whatever it is. The moment you step into this Norse world of Asgard, you're automatically just filled with wonder. And it feels like the opening 20 minutes of this film tell you everything you need to know about the world just through the visuals alone. I feel like I could watch this movie on mute and I would still know what's going on in most of the scenes. The film does tell you everything you need to know about the Nine Realms, with a scene between Thor and Jane, with Thor explaining how the realms work and how it fits into the MCU, and Earth and where they are and how it relates to everything. The way it's written is so simple in premise, that when he says it, it's a lot. It's very complicated, but the way they explain it is so simple. So the way that Brana is able to show this universe and convey it simply is very impressive and a great way to convey a hard subject for some audience members to probably understand who don't know the lore behind it, like comic book nerds like me do. The line,
"Your ancestors called it magic, and you call it science. Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same thing,"
is especially powerful to me because it shows how gods see things versus how mortals like Jane Foster see things. And it shows different lights and the Shakespeareanness of it. It brings it down to our level, even though they're talking in this high manner. We can understand them, and the movie makes them feel powerful and larger than life while also being at our level. It's really a good way for us to relate to the characters, even though those characters are fighting like gods and fighting these big things, but we can still relate to them, which is the most important part. Essentially, what Thor learns in the movie is to be humble and to fight for what he cares about, than fighting for what he hates and not cherishing what he has. And the message works really well because the story is so simple. Like in my last review, I talked about Lightyear and how that message was simple, but it was in an overcomplicated plot, and it doesn't work. But if you have a simple plot and a simple message, it works like perfection, and Thor is a perfect example of that. And it's great when compared to Loki's character in the film. It's like two sides of the same coin almost. While Thor is Odin's actual son and was almost decided at birth to be the warrior and the king that Odin would select, Loki was a stolen baby from the Bifrost from the hands of the evil frost giants that was treated with the same love as Thor, but since he would never get the same opportunities, it's almost driven him mad to hurt the ones he even loves, because he simply doesn't think he received the same love that Thor did and didn't get the same equality that Thor did, which that would turn anyone mad. But what Loki doesn't see is people still care for him, and he just doesn't see that, and he wants to destroy because he doesn't think he was treated the same. And Hiddleston, my God, Tom Hiddleston knocks it out of the park perfectly in this role. And it almost feels like he was born to play the role of Loki. With every movie and show that comes out with him in it, he gets better and better and better, and I just love this Loki character. And I'm not alone on that. Everyone has loved Loki since 2011. In the scene where Loki's berating Odin because of what Odin has been telling Loki for all these years is a perfect scene. It really is a perfect scene. It shows how all Loki wanted was the truth and justice. But Odin let Loki build up all this jealousy and rage, and it turned him mad and made Loki turn against his own family just because he didn't think he got what he deserved. And really, you can say that Odin got what he was coming for, but it's just complicated. It's like no one's right in this situation. So when Loki lashes out, you almost feel for him, but you know he shouldn't, because Odin did save him, but Loki doesn't see it as that. It's really a perfect scene.
Why? You were knee-deep in Jotun blood. Why would you take me?
You were an innocent child.
No. You took me for a purpose. What was it? Tell me!
I thought we could unite our kingdoms one day, bring about an alliance, bring about a permanent peace through you. But those plans no longer matter.
So I am no more than another stolen relic, locked up here until you might have use of me.
Why do you twist my words?
You could have told me what I was from the beginning. Why didn't you?
You're my son. I wanted only to protect you from the truth.
What, because I am the monster that parents tell their children about at night? You know, it all makes sense now why you favored Thor all these years. Because no matter how much you claim to love me, you could never have a frost giant sitting on the throne of Asgard.
Loki planned an assassination on his father, and then turned that around and tried to eliminate the entire race of frost giants, his own race, to please his father into giving him the throne. And the roles are almost reversed at the end climax of the film. I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but Thor tries to stop Loki from killing the frost giants at the end of the film, and at the beginning of the film, the action that gets Thor banished, Thor is trying to destroy all the frost giants to please his father. It's cool how that turns around like that. All Loki ever really wanted to be was Thor's equal, but he never got that opportunity, and it really shows how emotional of a story Loki has had. You can really see Loki dwelling into the madness in the final battle with him taunting Thor about caring for others and unleashing all the anger he had for Thor all those years.
Now fight me. I never wanted the throne. I only ever wanted to be your equal. I will not fight you, brother! I'm not your brother. I never was. Loki, this is madness. Is it madness? Is it? Is it? Come on, what happened to you on Earth that turned you so soft? Don't tell me it was that woman. Oh, it was. Well, maybe when we're finished here, I'll pay her a visit myself.
He is giving in to his inner frost giant, and you can even see it on the lighting in the scene. The lights almost make Loki's face seem blue, showing he's giving in to his inner frost giant, looking more bluer and darker as the light shimmers on him. Ultimately, when Loki's plan fails, and he's holding on to Thor's hand and yelling to Odin,
I could have done it, Father! I could have done it! For you! For all of us!
No, Loki.
Loki, no.
that's almost the final straw, as if he sees there is nothing left for him, and so he just lets go of Thor's hand and gives himself into the jealousy and anger and almost the depression of it. And seeing Thor scream for his brother, because you can see he does care about him. They do love each other, but the conflict is just too big for Loki. Like, he can't take it anymore. And it's a cool mirror to see how Loki has become more angry and Thor has become more loving. Again, the family dynamic in this film is the best part about it because of how emotional and powerful it can be at times. The emotion is also done extremely well in this film. You can tell Thor goes through a lot in this film, from losing everything. And then when he is captured on Earth by S.H.I.E.L.D. and Loki comes down to him and tell him, "Father died and he banished you and you may never come back." That just hits Thor, and you really feel for the guy because you're like, Loki, you're a lying son of a... you bastard. But Thor goes to a lot, and he goes, in that scene, you can see how he goes from happiness from seeing Loki, to sadness from what Loki says, to anger for what has happened.
What's happened? Tell me, is it Jotunheim? Let me explain to Father.
Father is dead.
What?
Your banishment. The threat of a new war. It was too much for him to bear. You mustn't blame yourself. I know that you loved him. I tried to tell him so, but he wouldn't listen. It was so cruel to put the hammer within your reach, knowing that you could never lift it.
You bastard. Of course, we all know Loki was lying, and Thor gets back his powers at one point and defeats Loki, but he was only able to defeat Loki and get his powers back because of what he was able to see in others and himself. But it's also able to balance some of the funny moments and the dramatic moments pretty well, even if the drama takes a bit of more of a front seat than I would like, but the comedy still hits when it's there. The action is usually great in this movie. Let me say usually great. When I can tell what's going on. The beginning action scene with Laufey, which that's weird. Why is the leader of the Frost Giants named Laufey? That's really weird to me. I don't know anybody named Laufey, but if I did, I think it was a big fat slob guy, not the leader of a race. That's just weird to me. Anyways, Thor takes on Laufey in the beginning of the film. You can't tell what's going on half the time, but in the second half of the fight, you do see what's going on, and it's fun action. It's gives me a Lord of the Rings vibe almost, with a little more sci-fi thrown in. But it's done really well, and when you can see what's going on, it's really awesome. Especially when Thor's swinging the hammer and using his lightning to take out these guys. You really feel the punches and the hits of the hammer. And the sound design from Mjolnir in most of this film is fantastic. And they really nailed the sound designs. The last two action set pieces of the film is where the grandness of it lies. With the battle versus the Destroyer, who comes to destroy Thor that Loki sent. And then the final battle against Loki and destroying the Rainbow Bridge that coincides with Heimdall breaking out of the ice that Loki put him in. The battle against the Destroyer is mainly just to showcase Thor getting his powers back after getting his ass kicked as a mortal. But once Thor gets his power back, man, it is so badass, and he destroys that Destroyer. It is awesome. It's so creative, and it adds a lot to the film because we hadn't had an action scene since the beginning of the film when Thor had his powers last. So it's great to see him finally back in action, and you really feel like it's earned in this movie. Loki versus Thor at the end is also very fun. You can see the action clearly, and the hits feel like they really land in this fight. You know Thor doesn't want to fight Loki, but Loki wants to fight Thor desperately, and you can feel it with Loki's anger throughout the fight. The only downfall to the action is there's not a lot of it. The build-up to the action is good, but it isn't as compelling as it needs to be for the action to completely pay off. But it does pay off in a way that feels good but isn't perfect. That's not to say the action isn't kick-ass, though. There's a scene when Thor's warrior friends fight the Destroyer, and that's a lot of fun. One of the guys just tries to jump on the Destroyer, and the Destroyer just smacks him back about 50 feet into a car. I don't know how that man's alive, but it was really funny to watch. The Asgardian scenes in the film are also much more interesting than the scenes on Earth, and even though Thor interacting with humans on Earth is fun to see, it isn't half as interesting as the human characters Loki, Odin, and the Bifrost. Although Thor does have some great lines, but you would rather be back in Asgard seeing what dramatic tension is building between Odin and Loki, or what Loki plans to do with the Bifrost. And I'm glad that they used the space Asgard realm element more in the Dark World and Ragnarok, because it's a lot more fun than being on Earth with Jane Foster and the dreadful Kat Dennings. That also might be because the human characters they interact with aren't very good or interesting, especially Jane Foster and Darcy, played by Kat Dennings, who again is dreadful. Did I mention Kat Dennings sucks? Thor and Jane's chemistry is also something I didn't really buy, because there's no reason that this human woman would want to be with Thor. Understand why she would be obsessed with him, because he is living proof that her work does in fact make sense. But I don't see why she would be interested in Thor. By the time Thor gets his powers back and they kiss, it feels extremely forced and not earned. Hopefully it's better expanded upon in the next movie, but I honestly can't remember what happens in the second movie. But honestly, guys, the worst part of this movie is the Dutch angle lens. They are absolutely horrific, and it's the reason I'm conflicted on how this movie is shot. Some shots, like the wide of Asgard and certain shots in Asgard, are especially beautiful, but then the other half of the shots are sideways. And I'm not kidding. Half of them are Dutch angle lens. I understand if a few, maybe 10 or 15, that's still a lot, are Dutch angles. But no, half of them are Dutch angle lens, and I don't understand. They do it like 50 times. Kenneth Branagh, what is your obsession with Dutch angle lens? And also, the color grading is kind of rough in some scenes. I think in this movie is almost ugly because it's so dark, but then you see the wide shots of Asgard, and they're so good. They're so good and beautiful. But then you have the Dutch angle shots, so I'm conflicted. It's like really bad and really fantastic. There's no in between with this movie. But besides some of the side characters and the visual shots, this movie's emotion really brings it up for me, and the action really brings it up for me. And it's hard for me to say that this is a bad movie because it's not. It's really good in my opinion. It's not great, but it is good. And it's got a fun villain and some good visuals. Even if some of the characters are a bit boring in parts, I would still give Thor a 7 out of 10. Let me know what you guys thought of the film, if it was really bad or better than what I thought. I'd like to see what you guys think, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.